Fontainebleau Hotel, Collins Avenue, Miami Beach. Saturday afternoon, December 1957. Ruth Perlman, 38, from Flatbush, Brooklyn, the wife of a coat manufacturer in Manhattan's Garment District, is standing under the porte-cochere while a bellhop lifts 3 suitcases from the trunk of the airport taxi. 2 of the suitcases are ordinary. The third one Ruth carried onto the plane herself and did not let the porter at Idlewild touch. Inside it is a gown. She bought it in October, on Kings Highway, for a staircase. She has never seen the staircase. She has seen a photograph of it in a magazine, a curving flight of marble rising out of a lobby the size of a train station, with no visible destination. The magazine explained that the staircase leads to a coat check on the mezzanine and to nothing else. It exists, the magazine said, so that a woman can leave her wrap upstairs and come down slowly, in full view of the largest hotel lobby in Florida. Ruth read that sentence in a dentist's waiting room in Brooklyn in March. By April she had the reservation. The hotel was 3 years old and it was already the most famous hotel in America, the one Groucho Marx had called the 8th wonder of the world on its opening night. Her husband wanted the 2 weeks for the sun and the pool. Ruth wanted them for a flight of stairs that architects in New York called vulgar and that she had been thinking about, in a specific and private way, since March. Because here is what Ruth Perlman knew that the architects did not say out loud: no building she had ever entered in her life had been designed around the moment of her own arrival. Her apartment building had a lobby you passed through. Her husband's showroom had a freight elevator. This hotel had spent a fortune constructing a stage whose only purpose was the 30 seconds it took a guest to descend into a room full of people who would look up. What kind of hotel builds a staircase to nowhere, and what kind of world made a schoolteacher's economy of 11 months, or a coat manufacturer's good year, worth spending on the right to walk down it? The staircase was the answer to a question a hotelier named Ben Novak had asked in 1952. Novak had bought the old Harvey Firestone estate, 20 oceanfront acres on Collins Avenue, for $2.3 million, and he asked an architect named Morris Lapidus to build him the most luxurious hotel in the world. Lapidus had spent 20 years designing shop interiors in New York, learning how a doorway makes a person feel before they know what they feel. He said American taste had been trained by the movies, so he would design a movie set. What opened on December 20, 1954, had 554 rooms, a lobby of 17,000 square feet, a ballroom built for 3,000 people, an ice skating rink in Florida, a pool shaped, the hotel liked to say, like a cat, and no sign anywhere on the building. Lapidus argued the architecture itself was the sign. He was right. On opening night, 1,600 guests paid $50 a plate for a dinner dance, a formal evening that combined a served dinner with orchestra dancing, and the kitchen went through 110 pounds of caviar. The critics called it vulgar. The public called the reservations desk. And the staircase told every arriving guest, before they had seen their room, exactly what this hotel intended to be: not a place to sleep near the ocean, but a stage on which an ordinary American could perform, for 2 weeks, a grander version of their own life. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of the American Beach Hotel between 1920 and 1980, the lobby, the dining room, the pool terrace, the Saturday night ballroom, the staff who knew which table was yours before you sat down, and what each of these things meant for the specific people who organized their year-around being in them. Not nostalgia for old swimming pools. The documented social reality of an institution that gave some Americans a dining room captain who knew their name and turned other Americans away at the reservation desk. What did the Fontainebleau lobby give Ruth Perlman in December 1957 that the chain hotel check-in counter of 1974 was not designed to give anyone? A staircase built for nothing except her entrance. And if you stayed in these hotels, or your family did, put it in the comments. Did you or your family stay at the Fontainebleau, or anywhere on Collins Avenue, in the 1950s or 1960s? Next time, the Eden Rock, built next door by Novak's former partner, and the tower the Fontainebleau raised to put its rival's pool in shadow. Back to the lobby. But to understand who that stage was built for, you have to know what this same beach had printed on its hotel advertisements 20 years earlier, and who those advertisements were written to keep out. Who was the Fontainebleau's lobby actually for? Who was the Fontainebleau's lobby for? To answer that, you need to know what Ruth Perlman's parents could not have done on this beach. Before you can understand why a Jewish hotelier building a French palace on Collins Avenue in 1954 meant something, you need to understand what the racial and religious geography of Miami Beach had been. In the 1920s and 1930s, deed covenants barred the sale of Miami Beach lots to Jews north of 5th Street. Hotel advertisements said it plainly. One from the 1930s read, "Always a view, never a Jew." Others used the polite code that meant the same thing, restricted clientele, selected clientele. Those two words on a brochure told a family named Perlman not to write for a reservation. It was 1947 before Miami Beach outlawed the signs, and 1949 before Florida's legislature barred the discrimination itself in hotels and real estate. As late as 1953, 1 year before the Fontainebleau opened, the Anti-Defamation League surveyed Florida resorts and found whole towns where a reservation request under a Jewish name had virtually no chance of acceptance. So consider what December 1954 was. Ben Novak, a Jewish hotelier. Morris Lapidus, a Jewish immigrant from Odessa whose family had fled the pogroms. Together they built the largest, loudest, most photographed hotel in America on the very shoreline whose advertisements had told their people to stay away, and the staircase in that lobby was available to any guest with a reservation, including a coat manufacturer's wife from Flatbush who had bought a gown for it. That is part of what Ruth Perlman's slow walk down the marble was carrying. The lobby was a stage, for some of the guests on it, the performance included the fact of being allowed on the stage at all. But the 1949 law had a boundary, and the Fontainebleau sat inside it. Because on this same beach, there were performers who filled the hotel's own supper club at midnight, and who were forbidden, by custom and by city ordinance, to sleep in any hotel on the island. Who were they, and where did they go at 2 in the morning? They went across the causeway. In 1952, Jet magazine described the arrangement on Miami Beach in one sentence: local custom prevented Black Americans from living in any white Miami Beach hotel, while nightclubs were permitted to employ Black entertainers, as long as separate washrooms and dressing rooms were provided. The city had an older instrument too, Ordinance 457, which required Black domestic and hotel workers to register and carry passes to be on the beach at all. The performers who filled the supper clubs of Collins Avenue, artists of the stature of Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, Sammy Davis Jr., finished their second show after midnight and were driven across Biscayne Bay to the mainland. What waited on the other side was Overtown, the neighborhood they called the Harlem of the South. Its hotels, the Lord Calvert first among them, filled the pages of the Negro Motorist Green Book, the guide that told Black travelers which doors in America would open. And in July 1954, 5 months before the Fontainebleau's Caviar, a new 50-room motel opened in neighboring Brownsville, the Booker Terrace, later famous as the Hampton House. Air-conditioned rooms, a swimming pool, a jazz club where the same musicians who had played the beach at 10 played for their own community at 3. Martin Luther King Jr. swam in that pool, and in 1960 delivered an early version of the speech the world would later hear in Washington. Hold both Decembers in your mind at once, because both are true. Ruth Perlman descending a marble staircase built by men whose families had been told never to come, that is this hotel. And a singer whose voice had just filled that hotel's supper club riding across the causeway at 2 in the morning because no room on the island, at any price, would take him, that is this hotel too. The Fontainebleau did not invent the arrangement. It inherited it, profited from it, and staged its evenings inside it. So what, exactly, was one of those evenings? What happened at La Ronde when the lights went down, and what had Ruth Perlman's gown been waiting for since October? The gown had been waiting for a Thursday. That was the night Ruth and her husband had booked the supper club, La Ronde, the room that made the Fontainebleau a broadcasting address as much as a hotel. A supper club was a specific institution, not a restaurant with music and not a nightclub with food, but a formal evening engineered as a single continuous performance, dinner served in courses at your reserved table, an orchestra, a floor show, dancing between the acts, and a headliner who came on when the plates were cleared. At La Ronde the headliners were the biggest names in America. Frank Sinatra performed there so often through the late 50s that the Novaks eventually kept a room in the Versailles Tower permanently out of inventory for him. Steve Allen broadcast The Tonight Show from the room. And in March 1960, the hotel staged the television event of the era, when Sinatra welcomed Elvis Presley home from the Army before 67% of everything watching television in America that night. But the institution was never really about the famous name on the bill. Here is the insider's truth about the supper club: the audience was also the show. Ruth Perlman did not save the gown for Sinatra. She saved it for the room, for the captain who pulled her chair, for the couples at the next tables who were also in their best, for the walk from the lobby past the staircase and the full knowledge that tonight the dress was exactly right. In Flatbush there was no room on earth that required that gown. The Fontainebleau had built one, staffed it, lit it, and scheduled it, every night of the season. That was the product. The ocean was scenery. And the evening was only half the day. Because at 10 the next morning, the same guests would be lying beside a pool shaped like a cat, in a social world with rules just as precise as the supper clubs. What did a Tuesday morning at the Fontainebleau pool actually consist of? A Tuesday morning at the Fontainebleau pool consisted, first of all, of the fact that it was Tuesday morning and nobody was anywhere else. That was the entire miracle, and it is easy to miss. Ruth Perlman's ordinary Tuesday at 10 was a kitchen in Flatbush, her husband's was a cutting floor on 7th Avenue. At the Fontainebleau, 10 on a Tuesday was a chaise beside a pool the hotel's own publicity described as shaped like a cat, on 20 acres of oceanfront, in a month when Brooklyn was frozen. The pool terrace had its own precise social order. The cabanas, the private poolside rooms that could be rented for the season, were the terrace's real estate, and who held which cabana was information the regulars traded like stock prices. The open chaises were claimed early and defended with towels and paperbacks. A pool attendant remembered who took which chair. Lunch came to you. The house telephone came to you. Men conducted their New York businesses in bathing trunks beside a cabana phone, which was precisely the point, the performance of a life in which even work happened in the sun. Notice what the hotel had actually manufactured. The ocean was 50 steps away and free. The public beach did not require an 11-month reservation. What the Fontainebleau sold was not water. It was the terrace's society, the daily, repeating, gently competitive world of the same faces in the same chairs, where by the 4th day the attendant knew your name and by the 7th the couple under the 3rd umbrella were dinner companions. Period Holiday magazine coverage of Florida winter resort hotels describes exactly this, guests who barely touched the sand for 2 weeks, because the sand had no captain, no cabana, and no audience. All of it, the terrace, the supper club, the staircase, ran on people. Hundreds of them, mostly invisible when the machine worked. Who were the people running the Fontainebleau, and what did they know about their guests that the guests never suspected was known? What the staff knew was everything. The dining room captain knew which couples were celebrating and which were enduring. The bellhop knew whose luggage was borrowed and whose was inherited. The pool attendant knew, by the 2nd season, which guests tipped at arrival to secure the chairs and which tipped at departure out of guilt. A grand hotel of this scale was a small city of chambermaids, switchboard operators, pastry cooks, cabana boys, and captains, and a great many of those workers were black Miamians who crossed the causeway each morning under the same pass system that barred them from being guests, staffed the machine all day, and crossed back at night. The institution Ruth Perlman experienced as effortless was a workforce she was designed not to see. And while the machine ran at full season, the thing that would end it was already on the highway. In 1952, 2 years before the Fontainebleau opened, a builder named Kemmons Wilson opened the first Holiday Inn outside Memphis. The formula was the exact inversion of Collins Avenue, a standardized room, a predictable price, a pool, free parking, no captain, no cabana hierarchy, no staircase. By 1958 the price war on the beach was already brutal. A week at a mid-sized oceanfront hotel, meals and entertainment included, could be had for around $270, and the mid-sized houses were bleeding guests upward to the Fontainebleau and Eden Rock and downward to the motels. Then came the jets. By the early 60s, a winter charter to Nassau or San Juan cost close to a Miami Beach season, and the guests who could choose began choosing somewhere new. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 finally outlawed the exclusion the beach had been built around. Harry Belafonte had already broken the hotel color line by staying at the Eden Rock next door. The doors opened just as the institution behind them began to hollow. What did Collins Avenue become when the Formula One, and what happened to the hotel that had built a staircase to nowhere? Ben Novak held on longer than most. Through the 60s the Fontainebleau still commanded the Strip while smaller houses around it converted to retirement residences or closed. But the season kept shrinking, the jets kept flying south past Florida, and the numbers finally arrived at his door. In 1977, 23 years after the caviar, Novak lost the hotel in bankruptcy. The building survived, new owners, and eventually a national chain's management running the operation for the next 3 decades. The building was never the thing that died. Picture a woman of Ruth Perlman's daughter's generation walking into that lobby in the late 70s with a gown in her suitcase, because her mother had told her about a Thursday in December 1957. The staircase was still there. The marble still curved up to the mezzanine. But La Ronde Supper Club evening was gone the way of every supper club in America. The captain's reservation books had given way to systems, and nobody in the lobby looked up anymore, because the room no longer taught its guests that descending was a performance. The staircase had not changed. The institution that gave it meaning had ended. The hotel was still there. The stage had been struck. If this channel is going to keep documenting what the American Beach Hotel was and what it meant to the people who shaped their year around it, subscribe. There are more lobbies, more dining rooms, more Saturday night dinner dances, more guests who packed a separate suitcase for the evening, and more families with the green book open to the beach hotel listings. What did the Fontainebleau lobby give Ruth Perlman that the check-in counter of 1974 was not designed to give anyone? A staircase built for nothing except her entrance. And if you have a hotel, a lobby, a supper club, a cabana, a week, put it in the comments. Did your family stay on Collins Avenue in the 50s or 60s? What do you remember about the night someone dressed for the staircase? Next time, the Eden Rock, the hotel built next door by Novak's former partner, and the tower the Fontainebleau raised to put its rival's pool in shadow. Ruth Perlman's gown hung in a Flatbush closet for the rest of its life, in a garment bag, behind the winter coats. It had been worn 5 times, all in one December. It had known exactly what it was for. By 1977, nothing on Collins Avenue did.